Right now, your body is doing almost nothing. You woke up in a room someone kept at a perfect temperature all night. You reached for a phone that was already charged. And the single most physically demanding thing you'll do all day might be standing up to grab a snack that was already sitting in the fridge 3 steps away. Nobody notices this. It's just Tuesday. It's just normal life. But a body that does this little, for this long, would have been a death sentence for almost every human who ever lived. Your ancestors walked miles before they ate. They carried home animals heavier than they were. They settled fights with their hands and went to sleep hungry, and they did it constantly, day after day, for hundreds of thousands of years. So here's what you'd assume. A man built by that life must have been drowning in testosterone, some ancient furnace of a guy who'd make the modern man look like a houseplant. And you, sitting exactly where you're sitting, must be running on the dregs. Here's the strange part. It might be completely backwards. So what actually decides how much testosterone a man carries, and why is each new generation quietly ending up with less? I went looking, and the answer is not the one anybody's selling. We all carry the same picture in our heads. The caveman. Heavy brow, huge jaw, spear over the shoulder, absolutely marinating in testosterone. And that picture does a lot of quiet work in the modern world. It's in the supplement aisle. It's behind every "our ancestors were built different" post. It's the story underneath a whole industry telling men that somewhere back there was a purer, stronger, higher testosterone version of them that soft, modern life stole. On the surface, it makes total sense. Hard life, hard men, big hormones. Right? Apparently not. Because when scientists finally went and measured men who still live something close to that life, actually measured them, the numbers came back pointing the completely wrong way. Deep in the Bolivian Amazon, there's a group called the Tsimane. Their days are the ancestral fantasy made real. They hunt, they fish, they clear land by hand, they walk for hours. Nobody needs a gym. The whole day is the gym. If raw physical living pumped up testosterone, these are the men who'd be overflowing with it. They're not. A team from UC Santa Barbara and the University of Washington measured them, and the average Tsimane man's baseline testosterone came in about a third times, lower times than an age-matched American. The kind of guy whose hardest daily effort is, again, the fridge. In the raw numbers, that's roughly 183 against 267. Sit with that for a second. Picture the two mornings, side by side. One man is up before first light, tracking something that could gut him, hours from anything resembling help. The other is scrolling in bed, deciding between two kinds of oat milk. Every instinct you have says the first man is the hormonal powerhouse, and the second one is the faded copy. It's the other way around. The man living the hunter's life has less. The guy with the oat milk has more. And it isn't one lonely tribe. When Harvard's Peter Ellison compared men across the US, Nepal, the Congo, and Paraguay, the same gap showed up foragers and subsistence farmers running 30 to 50% below Western men. There's more. In these groups, testosterone doesn't even do the slow fade with age that it does here. It just stays flat and low for life. So the story we've been told isn't a little off. It's completely inverted, which forces a genuinely uncomfortable question. If the hardest living men on Earth carry the least of it, then testosterone can't be a trophy you win for being tough. It can't be a manliness scoreboard. So what is it? Here's the reframe that changes everything. Testosterone isn't a medal. It's a dial. Think of the thermostat on that wall. It doesn't have opinions about how warm the room times should times be. It just reads conditions and adjusts. Your testosterone works the same way. The body sets it constantly, based on what the environment is actually asking of you, and, more importantly, what it can afford to spend. Not what you wish it would do. Not what looks impressive. What the world around you demands and permits. See it as a dial instead of a trophy, and those caveman numbers stop being weird. They start being the entire point, because a high dial is expensive. Seriously expensive. Testosterone builds and maintains muscle, and muscle is one of the most calorie-hungry things a body can haul around. It burns roughly a fifth of a man's resting energy just to exist. And researchers put a hard number on it. Using a method that tracks every single calorie a body spends, they found that one step up the testosterone scale costs Tsimane men around 240 extra calories a day. Every day. For nothing but holding the setting high. Put that in something you can feel. That's a small meal's worth of energy, burned daily, purely to keep the dial cranked. In a world of supermarkets and delivery apps, who cares, you'd never notice. But in a world where a bad week of hunting means genuine hunger, 240 calories a day is a luxury tax the body flatly refuses to pay. There's a second bill, too. High testosterone quietly weakens the immune system. In a place thick with parasites and infection, that's a completely real danger, the kind that kills you long before old age gets a shot. So the body does the smart thing. It turns the dial down, spends those calories on staying alive and fighting off disease, and saves the testosterone for the rare moment it's truly worth it. That's not weakness. That's a body being ruthlessly efficient in a world that punishes every ounce of waste. And you can watch that exact dial move today. In one of the most ordinary events, there is a man becomes a father. One study followed hundreds of men from before kids to after, and when they turned into hands-on dads, their testosterone dropped hard. Down about a quarter in the morning, a third by evening. The more they actually cared for the baby, the further it fell. The body reads the new assignment: protect, nurture, stay close, and turns the aggression down to match. No one loses their manhood holding their kid at 3 a.m. Their biology is just quietly shifting gears. Okay, but hold on. If the baseline is that low, how did these men hunt, fight, and haul anything at all? Fair question. And this is where the dial gets clever. A low baseline doesn't mean the tank is empty. It means the body isn't wasting fuel idling. When the moment actually arrives, it slams the dial up fast. Drop those same C-main men into a hard soccer match, and their testosterone spikes about 30%. And on a real hunt, watch what happens. The animal is down. His heart is hammering. His arms are burning. There are miles of hauling ahead, and right there, on impact, his testosterone jumps. Not hours later, back at camp, in front of an audience. On impact. Exactly when his body needs to move, fight, and recover. That's the tell. It wasn't for showing off. It was for the work. So look at the actual design. A lean, cheap, everyday setting, plus a system that floods you with precisely what you need the second the world turns serious, then powers back down. Efficient, not deficient. These men weren't low because they were soft. They were low because their bodies were smart enough to only pay for testosterone when it counted. And here's the thing, our bodies still run on that exact wiring. The machinery is completely intact. The only real question is what we're asking it to do, which turns the whole ancient man fantasy inside out. Those men weren't more manly because some hormone raged inside them. Their world simply refused to let them sit still, and their bodies paid the bill it handed them, line by line. The strength came first, forced out of them by cold and hunger and distance, and the hormone followed to cover the cost. Testosterone was never the cause of their strength. It was the receipt for a life that constantly demanded it. And this is where it stops being a story about a faraway tribe and starts being a story about the person watching. Because here's the part that should actually bother you. Modern men are losing testosterone, not just as they age, that's always happened. This is different. Measured at the same times, age, generation after generation, the number keeps sliding downward. One long-running Boston study tracked it and watched average testosterone fall from around 500 to under 400 in under 20 years, more than 1% down every single year, completely independent of aging. Another zoomed in on young men, the ones who should be sitting at their absolute peak, and found the identical slide, averages dropping from about 605 to 451 across the survey years. And before anyone blames it all on everyone getting heavier, even the lean, healthy weight young men fell, from 665 down to 529. Read that plainly. A 25-year-old today is, on average, walking around with less testosterone than a 25-year-old from his father's generation. Same age. Less. And maybe some of that lands a little personally. The tiredness that shows up for no reason. The sense, even in guys barely out of their 20s, that the engine doesn't quite rev the way it's supposed to. It's the easiest thing in the world to take that personally, like something's uniquely broken in you. But zoom out and it's barely personal at all. It's an entire generation of bodies responding, honestly and correctly, to a completely different world. So what's turning it? The same logic as the Tsimane, just flipped inside out. Their environment said, we can't afford this. Ours is quietly saying something almost stranger. We don't need this. Start with the obvious one. Body fat. Fat tissue runs an enzyme that literally converts testosterone into estrogen, so the more of it you carry, the harder your own body works against you. And the effect is brutal. Putting on roughly 30 pounds can drop your testosterone about as much as aging 10 full years. 10 years. From a belt size. Then sleep, or the way almost nobody does it anymore. Take healthy young men, cut them to 5 hours a night for one single week, and their daytime testosterone drops 10 to 15%. 1 week. That's not exotic lab torture. That's an ordinary stretch of deadlines, or a new baby, or just one more episode at 1 a.m. And add the rest, because it starts to sound suspiciously like a normal day. You sit for the commute. You sit for the work. You sit for the wind down. A body parked in a chair from morning to midnight, constantly still, gets a crystal clear message, no big physical effort is coming, and dials down to fit. It's not betraying you. It's believing you. On top of that, there's a soup of modern chemicals, the stuff in plastics and pesticides, that appears to nudge the whole system the wrong way, even if pinning down exactly how much is genuinely hard. Here's the honest catch, though, before anyone sprints to the gym expecting magic. Lifting weights spikes your testosterone for about 15 or 30 minutes. It does not permanently crank your baseline up. What it does is build muscle and burn fat, which helps the dial the long way around. And overdo it, grind yourself down with too much training and too little food, and the body reads famine and emergency, and slams the dial right back down. Same rule as the tsimane. Always the same rule. The body pays for exactly what the environment demands, and not 1 calorie more. Now, I owe you one honest complication, because the internet loves to wave this one around. Go really far back, 80,000 years and beyond, and some scientists argue the picture flips a second time. They measured more than 1,000 skulls, and found that human faces have slowly softened over that span. Smaller brow, shorter face, the bone version of calming down. And one reading of that trend is that our deep ancestors did carry higher testosterone, which then fell as we became a more social, cooperative, tolerant species, essentially domesticating ourselves. Apparently, we did to ourselves roughly what we later did to wolves. But, and this matters, you cannot measure a hormone in a fossil. That's an inference from the shape of bone, and it's genuinely contested. So here's the honest version. The very deepest past is murky, and might truly be different. But the caveman, almost everyone, actually pictures the forager, the hunter, the pre-modern man living off the land that man we times can times measure. And he runs lean. The myth just doesn't survive contact with the people who still live it. So step back and look at what really happened. We didn't lose our testosterone because we went weak. We built a world so safe, so fed, so warm and effortless that the body looked around, found no reason to prepare for a fight that never comes, and quietly turned the setting down. Ironically, the very comfort you're wrapped in this second is a piece of the reason. And look at the trade we actually made. We got heated rooms and full fridges and long nights nobody has to survive. We got to hold our newborns instead of dying at 40. That is not nothing, that is the exact thing our ancestors were breaking their bodies trying to reach, generation after generation. What we handed over in the deal was the constant physical demand that used to keep the dial turned all the way up. We didn't get softer. We got safer. And from the inside, it turns out, those two can look completely alike. So go back to that warm room, the charged phone, the snack that was already in the fridge, 3 easy steps away. This morning, that little scene looked like nothing, just normal, just Tuesday. Look again. There's no lost caveman superpower buried in your DNA. There never was. The man you were picturing didn't have a secret. He had a demand, cold, hungry, dangerous, constant, that your world has completely erased on your behalf. His body answered his world. Yours is answering this one, just as honestly as his ever did. That's the part that stays with me. The dial was never really about being a man. It was always about the life you're actually living. And that dial is still yours. It still answers to how you move, how you sleep, what you carry, what you keep asking of it. Your ancestors didn't have something you're missing. They just lived in a world that constantly demanded more of the body than ours will ever ask. Which leaves one quiet question sitting in your lap. Now that nothing is forcing your hand, What are you going to ask of yourself?